Sebastian Gorka, with this unique world of nothing inappropriate. That tells you more about what Mr. Gorka finds appropriate than it does about reality, because there's no question that this was inappropriate behavior. Donald Jr. admitted as much, talking to Sean Hannity, saying he would have done it differently. He would bring in authorities next time, and with good reason. So let's discuss just how much of a concern it should be. We got associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard, CNN political analyst David Gregory, and CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Jeffrey Toobin, let's just start with you. What I'm calling, and please correct the assertion if you disagree, talking about categories of illegality, to me seems very far down the road. Inappropriate, certainly, but illegal, that seems very advanced as an analysis. You?
Well, I basically agree with that. I mean, certainly, I think it is completely inappropriate and just legally wrong to talk about treason as even a possibility from the facts that we know at this point. It is illegal to solicit help from a foreign government. That is a violation of campaign finance laws.
Just the solicitation. You don't have to receive benefit?
Absolutely. That is.
But what if it comes to you? You're not soliciting it. It comes and lands in your lap.
Then it's not a crime.
So if you don't ask for it, then you're not soliciting, so it would be a question of fact.
That's right. And, you know, we got enormously important emails yesterday. What we did not get were any emails about what actually happened at this meeting and whether there was any follow-up and whether there were any other meetings with people who were described as representatives of the foreign government.
Don Jr. has said nothing happened and that there was no follow-up, but his credibility comes into question because he's changed his description of this meeting from the beginning.
Correct. And so, I mean, I think, you know, all of a sudden, the usual rule that lawyers have is that if someone has lied 2 times on the same subject, the third description is not necessarily true. It may be another lie. So I think it's going to be important for investigators working meticulously to get the story of what happened with this meeting with the Russian lawyer and find out, you know, whether any information changed hands. Just because Donald Trump Jr. says nothing happened, that doesn't mean nothing happened.
David Gregory, when I heard the text of the emails and read them, they're on the front page of the New York Times, I thought that we were being duped. I thought that it was fake news, meaning the true definition that somebody fictitiously wrote this because it was so over the top. It's like what you would write in a cartoon about Russia. So let me just read what I'm talking about. Here's the email. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary. This is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump. I mean, what do you hear?
It reads like a hypothetical of, let me give you a little tutorial on what's never allowed to happen.
Right.
It did set up that way. And in fact, we do know that some Trump allies are suggesting this was all a setup to try to entrap Don Jr. And if so, it was apparently successful, David.
What do you hear, David?
Well, right, because if this was just a pretext to get into a meeting about getting sanctions lifted, it worked. Because what's true, and we don't know where this goes in terms of the investigation. You know, on a daily basis, a near daily basis, we're dealing with pieces of the puzzle that the special counsel will put together, that House and Senate committees will put together. But what these emails make clear is that the Trump team welcomed support from Russia to beat Hillary Clinton. They were open for business, and that at the very least they were willing to play with fire, and the fire was Russia, an adversary of the United States, to try to undermine their political opponent. That is just wrong, and that is why it is engulfing the Trump presidency, and that is why it is undermining his credibility and those around him. Why? Because these emails now contradict months of denials from the White House, that we had to be treated to this garbage, that this was all fake, that it was a witch hunt, that it was just Democrats who were sore losers. Well, apparently there's more to it than that. And if you go back to the time when this was happening, what else was happening? A candidate for the presidency of the United States was openly flirting with the dictator of Russia. He and the vice presidential candidate were talking about what a great leader Vladimir Putin was, this man who orders people imprisoned, who's been associated with people getting killed who are political opponents. They were talking about him being a strong leader. Trump was openly calling for Russia to try to hack Hillary Clinton's emails, which was going on at the time. They were so cavalier about what an enemy of the United States could do, and they were welcoming help to undermine their political opponents.
And the president gave
That's
that
why
announcement.
this is such
Remember
a huge
the announcement
deal.
on June 6th or 7th, right at the same time of these emails, and that I have a big speech on Hillary Clinton coming, and then he did that in a couple of weeks.
And all the things that she's done
And
wrong.
we wonder what that
never happened.
was.
Not a great coincidence.
Do we want to remind people of the denials to just further drive David's point home?
Sure.
Listen to this.
Let's focus on what did not happen in that meeting. No information provided that was meaningful, no action taken, nothing.
If there's a meeting that was wholly appropriate, but which led to nothing inappropriate happened. There's nothing inappropriate.
It was a meeting that produced nothing. It was a let's be realistic. It's a 20-minute meeting out of a probably, at that point, 18 or 20-hour day. It produced no results, no information, no knowledge of anything.
It was a very short meeting. It was a meeting apparently about Russian adoption. And after about 20 minutes, the meeting ended, and that was the end of it. This is a developing story. I don't know much about it other than it seems to be on the end of the Trump individual. It's a big nothing burger.
The good news, they're finally on the same page. You're getting one message out of the White House spin machine. The bad news is that their fervor is only as good as the facts. We have no objective basis to believe about what happened in that actual meeting. You know, we don't know what was said. We know that the lawyer has said, oh, I didn't do anything like that. But everybody in there has a reason to not be telling the truth. So we don't know. And it has to be, just again, to correct this one premise, taking this meeting was a mistake for Don Jr.
As he's admitted.
He has said as much in his defense. So for Sebastian Gorka, or for anyone to say nothing inappropriate happened in taking this meeting is only a window into the lack of ethical considerations of Sebastian Gorka, A.B. Stoddard, because to think there was nothing inappropriate in taking this meeting means that you have an ethical problem.
Right. Look, before the meeting, Chris, it's this response in the email. He doesn't say, well, I'm going to have to give this pause, or what do you mean the Russian government's efforts to help my father's campaign? There's no response in any kind of surprise from Don Jr. in the email.
No, he asks to speak to the person who's supposedly setting this up. Eamon? Is that how we say his name?
I don't know.
So this is the problem, is it makes it seem as if that is not the first reference to the Russian government's efforts to help his father's campaign, because it didn't take him by surprise. He didn't ask what that meant. So you're not only willing to take the meeting, he doesn't say, what do you mean, could you tell me a little more about this Russian government efforts on my father's behalf?
And in fact, in the chain, AB, just to your point, Goldstone says, I believe you are aware of the meeting, and then discusses timing. So we don't know that this is a complete factual chain of all the conversations. He had asked to speak to this guy, Eamon, on the phone. And he said, have him call me on his cell. We don't know if that call happened.
The intermediary between the Russian lawyer and this guy, Rob Goldstein.
Right. But we don't know if there was an actual call, but we do know that Goldstone, in their next back and forth between Junior and him, says, I believe you're aware of the meeting.
Look, there's obviously a lot of things, questions, and information that still needs to be filled in. Yes, David?
Well, I mean, it's just this lack of transparency. I mean, look how Don Jr. has handled this whole thing. He didn't give any of this up until the New York Times got it, and then he released the emails showing how much he would love to get information that would be helpful to his father, given that the Russians wanted to help his father get elected, according to these emails. So he wasn't transparent about that. This is the same White House that's turning off the cameras in White House briefings, where the president's sitting here recording television all day and watching it and fuming about what's going on. I mean, the reality is they need to, first of all, the president needs an attitude adjustment about this Russia probe, that it's not an attack on his legitimacy unless there's more to this that we don't know, and that's quite possible. He needs to get out there and answer every question about what went on, who met with whom, what those associations were like. Try to account for the fact that he was so flirtatious with Vladimir Putin that it could have resulted in this. And how about detailing all his financial arrangements with Russia as well?
Guys, stick around. We have many more questions for you. But meanwhile, Democrats...
Nothing is proven yet, but we're now beyond obstruction of justice in terms of what's being investigated. This is moving into perjury, false statements, and even into potentially treason.
All right, so you hear there some Senate Democrats launching a new attack line on Donald Trump Jr.'s emails. You heard there Tim Kaine saying he may have committed treason. Is Tim Kaine out in front of his skis? And how will this play into the broader investigation into Russia meddling? Let's bring back our panel for all of this. A.B. Stoddard, Jeffrey Toobin, and David Gregory. So, Jeffrey Toobin, isn't that a little premature?
Yes. I think any discussion of treason is not only premature,
very
but
narrow statute, right? Tell us why.
Just because it involves helping an enemy during times of active hostilities, and whatever else you can say about our relationship with Russia, which is certainly tense at the moment, we are not in a hot or cold war with Russia, and also just there is no evidence that yet that the Trump campaign gave the former Soviet Union anything. So I just think,
or vice versa. By the way, I mean part of the irony here is that what Don Jr. was hoping for, as far as we know, wasn't delivered.
As far as he says.
Well, as far as he says, and the lawyer says, and everybody says. I mean, well, sure, I understand. We're taking them at their word on that.
That's right, but we do know that, at least according to intelligence agencies, there were active measures by the Soviet Union. I feel like it's been a long time since it was the Soviet Union, since Russia hacked all those emails, and that was something of great benefit to the Trump campaign. John Podesta's emails, the DNC emails. So, what the Trump campaign knew, if anything, about the hacking that went on, that's a critical question that the special counsel and the congressional committees will have to investigate, because that would be a thing of value if the Trump campaign knowingly received those emails.
Sure.
Plus, it is a crime to aid and abet the hacking of emails. So, there's a lot to investigate here, but treason seems way off the mark.
But look, one thing is clear, is that this exposure of these emails and this meeting has really rocked the White House, A.B. Stoddard. They had to figure out how to get on the same page about this. I'm sure your sources are saying the same things that I'm hearing, which is some of them didn't see this coming, didn't know. You have reporting out there that these emails only came to light when Kushner was getting ready with his lawyers. What does that suggest? If that's when these emails came to light, when Kushner was preparing, and next thing we know, they're in the New York Times, that's a problem for the White House right there.
Right. There's a lot of dagger throwing going on, because people are they're all suspecting each other, and that New York Times piece, the second one that cited 3 White House officials, made it clear, and I did check around on that's not from the FBI or some deep state. That's from within probably the West Wing, and there's a lot of suspicion that Jared Kushner shared that email after his lawyers came across it and kind of threw his brother-in-law under the bus. Now, we don't know that for sure, but it's contributing to this sort of feeding frenzy that's going on of paranoia and distrust that was already there. There are already sort of these feuding factions in the White House, we know. And from several accounts we've read that, so Gloria Borger has reported on that, so has Maggie Haberman, and that's how that the emails originally surfaced from Jared Kushner gathering his documents for the investigations. Yeah. And he might be thinking that he's going to spare himself, but it's the reaction, obviously, always from the top, right, that we keep reading.
Well, here it is, AB. While you've been speaking, no disrespect, but the president was tweeting, probably listening to you, and this is what he says.
My son Donald did a good job last night, meaning on Hannity. He was open, transparent, and innocent. This is the greatest witch hunt in political history. Sad.
Well, you know, witch hunts are great, but when they involve an email that your son responded to and then a meeting that he took, which subsequently could have led to the release of the WikiLeaks hacks, changes in the Republican platform to make it less anti-Russia and less pro-Ukraine. There are a lot of things that could have, what we were talking about in the previous segment, we don't know what came of that meeting. This is not a witch hunt, and I think it's interesting that we keep reading from White House sources and hearing from them that the president doesn't believe that the actions his son took are the problem. He believes the fact that we're covering it is the problem.
Right.
David,
well, and I think we have to get, look, the president's got a real problem here, which is he's only got one mode, which is defiance and insecurity. He has made it very clear that his primary use of his political capital is to besmirch the news media, to try to discredit the news media so that people won't believe what is reported. But facts are stubborn, and these facts are very difficult for this White House, and the leaking that he decries coming from his own midst, from his own people, is a sign that the White House is dysfunctional and is chaotic, and all of this is happening in the middle of an administration that is not accomplishing anything. That's the real problem. He promised to deliver results. He's not doing that because he's engulfed by his own suffering credibility and the suffering credibility of those around him. That's going to continue. Political capital gets sucked up and used up, and he's not able to train it in the direction that he really needs to. And I don't know who around him is going to help him see this. Republican leaders have made a decision. Apparently, they've forgotten the history, the strong history of the Republican Party to stand up to Russia. But they've decided to sit this one out and kind of wait for the special prosecutor to do this thing because they're still afraid of Trump and his supporters.
Well, look, let's just do a quick fact check, okay? Sebastian Gorka, again, was unleashed to get out there and say leaking is the problem. We learned about this situation from two places. One, as the emails were developed by Jared Kushner and his attorneys. That's the reporting about when this email chain came to light was discovered, and Kushner then once again revised his disclosure form, okay? So it's coming from the White House. Secondly, it's coming from Donald Jr., okay? So those are the first two facts. The third fact is this. For this to be a witch hunt, everything that Donald Jr. is saying would have to be untrue. For it to be a witch hunt, Donald Jr. would have to be lying about this whole email chain and someone coming to him with this suggestion. Because if Don Jr. is telling the truth, his father, the president, must be wrong.
But I don't think that we need to defend that it's not a witch hunt. I mean, I think that it's obvious that it's not a witch hunt.
Except that the president of the United States just said it is.
Right.
And you have to remember, again, it is either about him or it's about us. And if he's going to make it about us, he's got to embrace this Russian interference and say, look what they were trying to do to our election, to my own son.
One last thing that I want to get Jeffrey Toobin on, and that is that obviously there's an investigation going on. So we all talk about it. We don't know as much as obviously the special prosecutor Robert Mueller does. Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut yesterday said that he fears that the next thing that will happen is that Mueller will go the way of James Comey. So let me play this for you.
The bottom line is that we are beginning to understand why Donald Trump, the president, may have been so eager to fire Jim Comey if he felt that his own son was at risk. And we should begin looking for alarm lights flashing about possibly firing Bob Mueller, because clearly this investigation is coming closer and closer. There's a lot of fire here, more than smoke, closer and closer to the President of the United States.
Okay, Senator Blumenthal is obviously speculating there. He doesn't have any information. Your final thought, Jeffrey?
Well, I think it's a legitimate question to ask that, whether the president plans on firing the special counsel. He would have to get Rod Rosenstein, the Justice Department Deputy Attorney General, who, because of Jeff Sessions' recusal, is in charge of the investigation. He would have to tell Rosenstein to do it. Rosenstein might refuse, quit, get fired, and they would have to work their way through the chain of command in the Justice Department. But it's not a frivolous concern on the part of Mr. Blumenthal. Today is the day that the new FBI director nominee is going to have his confirmation hearings.
Yep.
And I know that several Democratic senators are going to ask him about whether there will be independence in this investigation, which of course also involves the FBI. So that's, one clue to watch what's going on.
We will have them on, and we will ask them about that.
And there's a lesson for both sides. For the president and the Republicans, don't call it a witch hunt. It clearly isn't. The president's own son just proved that. And on the Democrat side, don't go flying down the road of how bad the implications are. Let the facts lead the way. Republican operatives, some are